let me get to the breaking news, is that today a district court sided with a federal ruling that occurred a week ago that said the CFTC could no longer restrict Kalshi from establishing markets on congressional election outcomes.
All you timeless children with your predictions and flashbacks, trying to get ahead. What makes you think I can see you? What makes you think I believe you? Dreams inside my bed. Have you heard me play the news? Stepping up way late, shot, that's from the past. All the dreams were flying, all the thoughts were dying. Heard something fast.
We have big news here on this Thursday at the start of this episode of the Prediction Trade.
We have breaking news today, only for prediction market traders, and that's the essence of this show. There's a platform called Kalshi, Kalshi. Kalshi is the Turkish word for everything, and that's the inspiration behind Tarek Mansour, who is the founder, along with his partner Lana Lopez, I believe her name is. And they founded Kalshi several years ago as an events exchange, taking bets on events and different outcomes. Things like when will Taylor Swift's next album drop? What's the over-under on the high temperature of the day in Chicago? How many TSA passengers will be in the month of July? All those are legal betting markets. They are a licensed exchange to make markets in those areas. But they've always been restricted and precluded by law and by the CFTC from making markets on election outcomes, political prediction markets. The only legal market in the U.S. has been Predicted, operating under exemptive relief. Predicted is a New Zealand-based platform, but it's been operating under exemptive relief to have betting on election outcomes for probably 6, 7, 8 years now. I've been through 2 general election cycles with them, so let's say it's been 8 years easily. But the market's been closed to anybody else, and Predicted not too long ago had its exemption pulled by the CFTC, and they've been battling to keep that. So the political wagering that I do is on the Predicted platform because Kalshi never had politics. The only other platform outside of Betfair in the UK, which political betting has been legal for the longest time in the UK, has been Polymarket, and Polymarket was restricted any U.S. any U.S. wagers, so they could not take any. So the only way to approach Polymarket was through a crypto account and a VPN. And I know many traders in the U.S. that do that, but they're doing it illegally. And of course, all those
we would never, Jeff.
Never do that. And all those transactions are crypto-based, which adds another dimension to the risk of the market to have a crypto-based transaction market. But Polymarket has been killing it this year. They have booked nearly $1 billion worth of trades on the presidential election outcome. Polymarket has a $100 million maximum you can place on any particular bet, and they've been doing extremely well because there's no place to go if you want to bet on politics. Predicted, which is the platform I bet on, has a limit as to how much you can place and other different restrictions. So Kalshi's been trying to push the envelope. And the big news, let me get to the breaking news, is that today a district court sided with a federal ruling that occurred a week ago that said the CFTC could no longer restrict Kalshi from establishing markets on congressional election outcomes. That happened today, a couple of hours ago. So if you search Kalshi, Kalshi, you'll see stories from Bloomberg, Wired magazine, Axios. Everyone's covering this right now because it's breaking news. We have now reached the point where betting or wagering or speculating on the outcomes of political elections in the U.S. is now legal. Now, there might still be some battles. Kalshi already threw up some markets on their website at Kalshi. They threw up a Democrat versus Republican Senate outcome for the general election, Democrat versus Republican House outcome. They also threw up a Senate race in Montana. And you'll expect that they're going to be adding more markets. And then in the wake of the ruling today, you would expect that Predicted will start adding more markets as well. So as of today, political wagering in the U.S. is no longer a niche thing. It's going to open up a much larger market, and you'll see a lot more of this in the days to come. So that's where we are. That's the breaking news I wanted to share.
We've talked about Kalshi. We've talked about poly market before. Of course, never encouraging anyone to bet illegally. But now the betting is legal, Jeff. And so there are now more options and there are more abilities for people to, participate in this process, quite frankly. And this could mean centralized clearing down the line. Tom Sosnoff, founder of tastylive, Tasty Trade, he's very much on board and think that's a great idea. So this is going to be exciting next few weeks because now the public's eye will be on these betting markets, and hopefully they're tuning into the prediction trade to learn what's happening and what's influencing the trends and the various trades that they may be operating in,
yes.
Which I suppose brings us to the big news of the day politically, which is that there's not going to be another debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Jeff, did you watch the debate this week?
Of course. I was live wagering the debate as well, although since markets have been restricted on Predicted, there aren't as many opportunities to live wager, and no one expected that event to move the needle too much. I'll tell you what the outcome was, and we can talk about the debate itself. But on Predicted, pre-debate, which has had a Harris leaning, Harris was up about 2 cents. To Trump. And now she's up about 5 or 6 cents to Trump, or even more, actually. I think it widened out a little bit more. So she gained about 2 or 3 cents in the betting on Predicted. Over on Poly Market, Trump has been leading. And it's important to know there's a difference in those markets because Poly Market is a much more liquid market. There are millions and millions of dollars, as high as $1 billion is the estimate, that's been bet on the presidential election outcome over on Poly Market. And Trump had been favoring that very, very liquid market. He'd been up by about 3 cents pre-debate. And now, as of today on Poly Market, I'm looking at it right now, Harris is 50% and Trump is at 49%. And we say this every time we do the, every segment we do on the political trade, is that these are binary options. They trade from a penny to 99 cents. Contracts settle at $0 or at $1 if you're right or wrong, but you can trade in between. What people like Coleman Strumpf, one of the professors who's done the most academic work on prediction markets, has shown academically that there is a reliable indicator from what that price trades at to what the probability of that outcome is. So when the prediction market on Poly Market is saying that Harris is the 50% probability winner right now and Trump is at 49%, they're basically calling a dead heat as to the outcome, but that's also the wagering price as well.
We've seen a bit of a fallout from the debate, if you will, on Trump's side, to put it lightly. The debate was not good. To put this clearly, CNN impaneled a group of people to look at the debate results on June 27th, and they said that Trump beat Biden 67-33. The same panel of people, the same CNN panel this time around, said that Harris beat Trump 64-36. So you're looking at a trouncing. It was one of the worst debates that we've seen in the modern political era in terms of polling outcomes immediately thereafter. The only debate that was worse was the one that eventually took down Joe Biden's next run for his reelection. So as we look at the map now with the news that Donald Trump will not be participating in what he calls a third debate. The first debate was against Biden. The second debate was against Harris. He will not be participating in a third against Harris in the next few weeks. We've seen that Fox News has moved some races to the lean column, well, away from the lean column into the toss-up column. And that's North Carolina and that's Arizona. And that's pretty important. And excuse me, let me stand correct. That's North Carolina and that's Nevada. And that's really important because without North Carolina, as important as Pennsylvania is to Kamala Harris's chances of becoming the next president, North Carolina holds that same level of importance for Donald Trump when you were to look to someone like Nate Silver's Silver Bolton, for example, Jeff. Yep. So this race has really tightened up here in the past few weeks. Harris may have not received that post-convention bounce, but then again, this cycle, ever since Biden dropped out, there was no post-RNC bounce for Trump. This hasn't been a conventional cycle thus far, and people have been paying attention to politics well before Labor Day. So Jeff, what's the market that interests you most right now? That you found these markets in a dead heat, do you feel like it's even worth flipping a coin when our process has been when one candidate gets too far out in front of the other, 60-40, 57-43, you play the mean reversion.
That's right.
This is at mean reversion.
That's right. Yeah, we've called this cadence pretty well since we resumed our segments of the political trade. I think you and I have been pretty accurate on where there were opportunities. There wasn't one in the debate. I didn't think that the opportunity of 3 or 4 cents on an undetermined outcome warranted a wager on the debate itself, even though there was a 3 or 4 cent move, but that's not really a material move worth trying to take advantage of. So and your analysis is accurate. It's about Pennsylvania and North Carolina losing or having North Carolina begin its lean in the other direction is a big hit. Now, North Carolina moved this last week, according to Nate Silver, 0.7% in the direction of Kamala Harris, and Florida moved 0.1%. Silver does have Pennsylvania moving in Trump's direction over the last week.
Yes.
So it does mean this is still a dead heat. It's still a horse race. But to cut to the chase, until Kalshi and now predicted as a result of today's district court ruling, start adding more markets, this is too tight to wager. It's like it doesn't make sense. You don't have enough opportunity, and there's not enough spread. There's not enough variance to make a wager, unless you're making a binary bet on the outcome, and that's not really optimizing what the markets allow you to do. So most of us are patiently waiting on the sideline for the congressional markets to show up and the House markets to show up. The Senate market's an interesting market. I saw that Silver still has the Republicans favored to win the Senate at 75%, but now has the House going in the Democrats' direction at a 62% number. So that's becoming a little bit more tradable, but there's not enough liquid markets until they get ramped up over the next week. My guess is next time we're on the air next week together, there will be additional markets that will allow us to capture those opportunities.
I'm certainly interested in those markets because there has been this tail wagging the dog effect of down ballot bleed for Democrats when Harris begins to fall behind in the polls. You can look at the market implied probabilities from Polymarket and see that there are really two modal outcomes right now. Either Democrats preside over a divided government or Trump and the Republicans have a trifecta.
Right.
And so when we get some of those congressional races put on the board, we're actually going to be able to look at a little level of detail a little bit more granular than we can imply from what's currently on the board as it stands here today. But this is a good thing for people, Jeff. This is a fantastic development, I think, for traders everywhere, for those who are in the United States who haven't been comfortable betting on politics because there's still some cultural aspersion to it, excuse me. It's not really welcomed. It's been illegal. You have to use a VPN. You have to go overseas. So there is a taboo nature to it as well. That's all gone. And as you mentioned, close to $1 billion has been bet across all betting markets on U.S. politics this year. That number is going to explode, it seems like, over the next few weeks. Right. And I think it's important for people who are coming to these markets for the first time to go about them in a methodological way. You have to treat this like you're trading options as you were if you were, say, a tasty trader, for example. Exactly you have to know when there's value and the price is worth it. And I look to this board right now, and maybe if Harris starts to see some extension above 60 cents, I would look to buy Trump here.
That's right.
But outside of that, there's not really a trade to place right now because it's too much of a dead heat, and one candidate isn't traded at an improper valuation given where national polls stand right now.
That's exactly right. When you speak to what this means to active investors and traders, and obviously we're kind of free market folks over here and like to have more opportunities for people to make financial decisions and hedging decisions wherever they may be. So opening up these markets is definitely viewed as a good thing. But it was interesting. I sat in on the arguments, on the oral arguments on this case, and I jotted down some of the comments for you. The CFTC lawyers essentially argue that Kalshi's election market contracts are subject to manipulation and that they could shake Americans' faith in election integrity, as if there was any more room for that to occur. So that was basically the essence of their argument. And they basically said that, and then Kalshi's lawyers came back and said, well, you can't just state that there's a risk. You have to define what that risk is. And then the government lawyers came back and said, well, you don't have to have a flood before you know to build a dam. But they never were able, that was their quote, by the way, but they were never able to articulate where they thought manipulation might occur, et cetera. In the long run, the district court sided with the federal court on the basis that Kalshi was legally entitled to list these contracts because Polymarket essentially was whipping their butt, that all this money was going offshore and it represented a loss of opportunity for Kalshi. So it was really interesting to see how this shook out. The commission is kind of 3-2. It's a Democratic-leaning commission, 3 Democratic-appointed commissioners and 2 Republicans, and that's why these markets were never, because the Democrats had been against this for a long time, the Democratic commissioners. But the court now has made its ruling, and we can see what happens from here. If we have some time, I'd like to talk about something else because we have an interesting guest coming up next week that we should talk about. That's going to be on the prediction trade, but it's also worth mentioning a lot of the comments that we received about last week's guest, and that was Rachel Bitecofer. Read a great post on Rachel's Substack today about the markets and the post-debate bounce for Kamala Harris. But Rachel Bitecofer is a Democratic activist, a Democratic pollster, came out of Democratic think tanks. We don't approach prediction market trading from a political point of view. I'm politically agnostic when I'm making wagers on prediction markets. In fact, I can guarantee you the one thing that will hurt you as a prediction market trader is betting with your heart. Betting Absolutely. What you want to happen. That's not what we look for. We look for mispricings. We look for arbitrage opportunities. We look for expected value. We look for the market not capturing, polling accurately, and we look for mispricings, which, quite frankly, I think these markets are pretty inefficient because there are people that bet with their heads. But there are a lot of our viewers were uncomfortable hearing somebody expound such democratic values and thought that that represented some partisan intake. But hey, we're going to listen to anything. We're looking for something that moves the needle. And to offer a little bit of balance, we have a guest next week that comes from a different perspective. He's a pollster. It's Robert Cahaley of the Trafalgar Group. And he's worth talking about because Trafalgar came out of nowhere in 2016 as essentially being the poll that got Trump right. They figured out the factor called the shy Trump voter. And the shy Trump voter was just someone that wouldn't admit when he got a phone call from a polling group that he was going to vote for Trump because of social stigma. It's something that emerged out of what was called the Bradley effect, which I'm sure you remember. Mayor Tom Bradley from Los Angeles, African-American mayor, ran for governor and was expected to win, but he lost because of the Bradley effect. And that's people weren't willing to tell pollsters that, that they weren't going to vote for him because he was a black man. So the idea of being a shy voter that doesn't disclose their actual intentions to polling groups is really an important factor. There's so many things called house effects. In fact, Nate Silver talks about house effects in polling frequently and identifies which polls lean to the left, which polls lean to the right. Other house effects are what is the secret sauce between how you weight a poll. Like, for example, we saw Ipsos poll came out last week. It has Harris up 5 points. But if you know Ipsos, you know that it leans 2.5% to Democrats invariably, and that's the house effect on that polling. Other house effect factors include things like, do they call people on cell phones? If you're a polling group that only calls landlines, well, now 50% of homes don't have landlines. And if you're not including cell phones, you're missing between 1/3 and 1/2 of the electorate. So all these are biases that prediction market traders look at when they evaluate a poll. Can't just take a poll at face value. Nate Silver knows that. That's what they do. And that's why you have to kind of discern these things a little bit more carefully. But going back to Robert Cahaley of Trafalgar Group, he's going to come with a conservative perspective. He's not really a conservative polling group, but he admittedly has a bias that favors Republicans. So he's on with us next week. He's essential because he really captured, he turned the polling industry around in 2016 because everybody was wrong except him. So it'll be really interesting to see. He was going to be on this week, and we pushed him back because we wanted to have the benefit of seeing some post-debate polls so we can get a better assessment and Haley's perspective on how the debate influenced the national polls and, most importantly, states like Pennsylvania and North Carolina. So that's next week, same time on the prediction trade. We look forward to Robert Haley of the Trafalgar Group joining us.
Jeff, it's going to be great. And more importantly, I mean, isn't part of the problem here that people aren't willing to listen and seek out the opinions of people they don't agree with? And that's what we're going to do here. We want to bring on people from all sorts of different perspectives because maybe they know something about how markets are structured or how a polling situation is unfolding based on previous election cycles that can give us a bit of an edge. And that's what we're looking for here, right? Is there an edge in a 50-50 race? Maybe there's something turning up in the polling post-debates that we as laymen who are just doing this as a kind of a side thing, right? This isn't our primary vocation. Yeah. We are ultimately going to learn something new from these people who do this for a living. So if anyone from the DNC wants to come on, who works with the DNC wants to come on, anyone who works with the RNC, we're happy to have them on here. And Jeff, that's exactly what will have happened. We'll have a DNC guest last week. We'll have an RNC guest, affiliated guest next week. And we're going to cover the whole spectrum here. And hopefully we can get more people like that to appear in the future, which I think we have some things up our sleeves still.
We do.
Moving forward, which I'm excited about.
Yeah, we do. And I think it's also worth noting, as I said, if you start keeping an eye on Kalshi and predict it, invariably you are going to see more markets show up in the coming weeks right now. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's going to be more filings to the CFTC. Those take a couple of years, so they won't be around for the general election. But you're certainly going to see more market opportunities coming up shortly.
And what's nice about that is right now on Predict It, where it's the primary venue that U.S. Political bettors can access and trade through, it's mostly longer dated contracts. Who's going to win the presidential election? Right. There's nothing for immediate resolution. When you make your way through Polymarket, you'll see a lot more shorter dated type of betting markets. For example, who will be leading in the so-and-so polls by this Friday at X time.
Yes.
And so you can benchmark, right? It's not just who's going to win the presidency, it's who's perceived to be winning the presidency by this particular moment in time. And so it takes on the shape of, say, an options market with a lot of strikes available across different expiries where you're trading the same event, but not at the same place and point in time. So, Jeff, this is a good day. This is good news for everyone who likes trading markets and who's been looking to get into deeper markets but hasn't had the access here in the United States thus far.
And then, of course, looking at the popular vote margin, I think those votes, the popular vote margin, those are usually approached in tranches. So will Trump win by 1% to 2%, by 2% to 3%? Will Harris win by 0 to 1%, by 1% to 2%? Those kind of tranche-oriented markets will proliferate. We'll see a lot of those coming. Those are very popular on Polymarket right now. Our people are trying to, fine-tune what the vote outcomes are going to be in the popular vote in the Electoral College.